Alright guys, if you don't know, there seems to be some issues with the Korean translation of Wuthering Waves, and this person has written about it. And basically they wrote in Japanese and English, because even though they're talking about the Korean translation, they think that, of course, they think that like English and Japanese players are having a, an okay game, or an okay time with the game with the translations. But they want to point out like there's like lesser translation quality when it comes to Korean. So I wanted to read like their message. And so this tweet, it has quite a few likes and retweets, but I thought I just want to talk about it a little bit. I saw Ethan talking about it earlier, so I wanted to read it myself too. If you guys don't know, I do have a background in localization, including localization of video games. So, maybe I'll have some insight. I'm not sure. But let's see. So I hope everyone is enjoying the 2.0 update. It's been wonderful to see the global community so excited about the future of Wuthering Waves. However, for Korean players, the experience has been vastly different. Persistent localization issues have made it nearly impossible for many to fully enjoy the game, leaving a growing number of players frustrated and disheartened. I wanted to take this opportunity to share exactly what's happening in Korea and what's causing so much disappointment among the community. So they're saying that the main issue is the localization issue. So if the quality is like really bad, this is the thing I feel like maybe a lot of people don't understand is like if the localization quality is really bad, it makes like players feel like less valued as a customer of the game. And then that can make, over a few months, 6 or 7 months of it, I can see like if they're having this long of a problem with it, like that would become they already wrote long-standing issue. Okay, let me just read it. Korean localization has been a challenge since the very beginning. Even before the game's release, KR players voiced concerns about translation quality. In response, Kuro Games assured us that a dedicated KR localization team would ensure high-quality translations. Okay, let me keep reading because I already have some thoughts. Unfortunately, this promise hasn't been fulfilled. At launch, the game was riddled with poor translations and performance issues. I know this wasn't just an issue for Korean. English had a few localization problems. None of them were like completely distracting. Japanese also had a significant issue with the translation of a weapon description, as well as like other languages like French. I heard the French translation was like horrible from like Shao's and Lord Dragon. So, I mean, obviously it's not just a Korean issue. It seems to be a Kuro Games localization issue. Despite numerous feedback attempts from the Korean community, Kuro Games has yet to provide any meaningful resolution during the early stages of the launch. All things considered, the English translation is already showing some signs of improvement. Between 1.0 and 2.0, they have made like a lot of changes that makes the dialogue like just easier to understand in general. Not to mention they improved the voice acting. Now, I don't know if this has much to do with the voice acting because Korean is a high priority language for Kuro Games because it's also a voice acted language. So that means it's a high priority language compared to other languages, for example, like French, because it is a voice language. So you would assume that the localization would be prioritized, but who's to say? A glimmer of hope, question mark. In August 2024, so this is after the release, corresponding to mounting frustration, Kuro Games organized a user conference to gather feedback from Korean players and discuss potential localization improvements. This initiative sparked hope that meaningful change was finally on the horizon. Acknowledging that restructuring the localization team might take time, many Korean players opted to remain patient. However, as the months passed, it became increasingly clear that progress was minimal, if not entirely stagnant. Prior to the 2.0 update, Kuro Games launched a web event featuring Rina Sita and... Okay. So I want to talk about this really quick. So as you can see, I think this is important because it says the Korean players opted to remain patient. So it is showing that they're trying to be patient with Kuro Games. They had like a direct communication from them to the Korean players that they're going to try to improve the localization. In actuality, we also heard the same thing for English because it was one of the major feedback items that they received shortly after the launch. Of course, like I said, a lot of languages were involved in that, but yeah, overall, I do see kind of the English language being improved little by little. And Japanese still feels like a translated game, but like it's okay because I think like nowadays global players, especially like with games like Wuthering Waves that are like we know what country they come from, so we know that it's going to be translated material. So I do feel like a lot of Kuro Games players are actually like really patient with Kuro Games when it comes to the localization, because like they will like listen and they'll be like, okay, I do understand it's translated. Sometimes the translation comes off a little fishy. So I just want to say that because I think like when it comes to like style choices or like things that aren't necessarily like errors, it's just like how they say it or something. I think like in general, the global players are a little more understanding of it. But so I think they're going to talk about like some of the actual issues. So I'm curious to see like what kind of quality issues they were seeing. So let's keep reading. Prior to the 2.0 update, Kuro launched a web event featuring Rina Sita and new echoes. However, the event's poorly executed translations reignited backlash from Korean players who had grown weary of repeated missteps. Many hoped this update would signify a turning point for localization quality, a chance to start fresh. Instead, the 2.0 patch delivered translations worse than ever before, leaving players not only disheartened but deeply frustrated by the lack of improvement. I would like to see the web event, so give me a second. I'm going to find it. I do know a little Korean. I'm not a native Korean speaker. I'm obviously a native English speaker, but I learned Korean, so let me look at this. All right, this is the Korean site. Obviously, it's just a website, so it's not the game itself. This kind of item would already be like a lower priority compared to game translations, which, you know, does leave things open to being machine translated. So let's just take a look. If you participate in the event, 보상을 받아가세요. So that, yeah. Again, guys, I'm not a native Korean speaker, but this already sounds like kind of translated because it's 보상을 받아가세요. This is like take your reward. It's just like take your reward. Which I feel is like a little, I don't know, like maybe like a chance to get a reward. They could have translated that differently. Let me look around the website a bit. This seems strange to me too because it's like 수령하기 친구가 공유한 echo. So it says every day echoes that your friend shared, one card, collect one card plus 2 times. But it doesn't say 2 times what. Obviously, you can understand it. You can understand that it's plus 2 polls, but then they should have put the word for poll here. And then I don't know if they needed 친구 here. I want to see what it says in English. Yeah. In English, it just says claim 1 shared echo card daily. And then in Korean, it says every day, collect 1 card, 1 echo trading card shared by your friend. Plus 2. In English, it says plus 2 polls. Okay, I understand the website is poorly translated. I understand that. I can see that. The Christmas incident. The backlash reached a breaking point just before Christmas, forcing Wuthering Waves to issue a statement on X, pledging to resolve the ongoing issue. However, when 2.0 finally launched, it became painfully evident that the so-called fixes were nothing more than a word-for-word copy and paste of a fan-made translation written by a community member? So I'm guessing fixes to former translations. And so basically this person is saying they copy and pasted fan translations to fix some of the dialogue already in the game. I'm not sure what the breaking point was, but it sounds like maybe like around Christmas was where a lot of the complaints started coming out because of the Rina Sita stuff that was coming out. The Rina Sita marketing was poorly translated and it started going around more, and then the community around Christmas started like going nuts about it, and Wuthering Waves is like, sorry about the translations, we're gonna fix it. And then when they finally released 2.0, they found like they went back and looked at some of the older dialogues and they were just copy and paste of fan translations. To add insult to injury, Kuro Games neither contacted, credited, nor acknowledged this player's efforts. Okay, that's pretty bad. That's pretty bad. They simply took and used the fan-made translations without notifying the player, further exasperating the community's frustration and deepening their sense of distrust. Okay. That's definitely a huge faux pas. Meanwhile, in 2.0, the broader localization issues only worsen. Okay, now they're talking about the game. The new content was riddled with incoherent sentences, blatant mistranslations, and phrases written in North Korean dialect. A glaring oversight that left players baffled. Even more egregiously, the characterizations of key figures like Phoebe were completely butchered, and their personalities distorted, the names inaccurately localized. They're also saying that the translations were so bad that some of the characters' characterization seemed totally different in Korean compared to other localizations, which would be the mischaracterization, personalities distorted, and then the names inaccurately localized. These errors not only alienated Korean players, but also shattered immersion. Fair. That's fair. That's a fair statement, leaving many questioning if any effort was being made to respect the game's original intent. Okay, so let me keep reading. I have some more to say about this because obviously I think this person obviously also is familiar with localization of games. It seems that way. Their name is Game Soda KREN, so they must tweet in Korean and English. Maybe they're a translator themselves, I'm not sure. The current state. In a recent interview, Solon claimed that localization improvements are on the agenda. In a recent interview. Okay, there was a Korean interview. However, the subsequent official posts have completely failed to reflect this commitment. The persistent inconsistencies in quality has left Korean players feeling not only ignored, but utterly exhausted by the lack of meaningful progress. For instance, recent posts about Hakate and Brant on YouTube and X showcase shockingly poor translations, even in basic short sentences. Wait, I gotta see this. Let me find Brant. Archive 미리 보기 Brant. That looks fine. 어디 보자. 생활의 의리를 어떤 무대로 내려갈 것인가. Oh. Oh. So, I think it's this. Again, guys, I'm not a native speaker of Korean, but I think it's 생활. I want to see how they translate. Okay, let me just say what it says. What I think it's supposed to say. It's saying, what kind of stage will life bring us to? Except for life, they use a word, 생활. 생활, life means more like lifestyle or way of living. So, for example, if I sleep 8 hours a day and eat right, eat vegetables every day, then I will improve my life, right? And that's the life that they're using, 생활. But they probably should have used a different life here, probably like 인생. Actually, let me just look at let me find the English. So what new stage will life take us? See, so this is what it's supposed to be like. That's the problem. Let me look at the comments. I think, okay, guys, it's the fucking 생활. This just says translation. This compared the Chinese version, and they just put it in Google, and they said the machine translation is better. Like, do the translation right. And they're just writing 생활. They're writing the wrong term over and over again. Okay, guys, it is the 생활. So, like, if even I, who again is not a native speaker of Korean, can see the problem, I think that means like it's pretty bad. This outraged Korean players, as it should, especially given Kuro Games' recent promise of improvement. Okay, so the argument I think is pretty solid because they're saying like they had a problem from 1.0, they complained about it, there was even a community event they had, and they promised to make it better. And then after Renacita marketing material was poorly translated as well, more people got upset again, and then once again, Wuthering Waves made a statement that they would get better. However, whenever it was released, it wasn't better. There were all these problems with the actual game, not to mention with the actual marketing was wrong as well. And so the Korean players are pretty not happy. They are outraged, is what it's saying. If you're a Korean player, you can confirm or deny that, but it's just they're outraged. Especially given Kuro Games' recent promise of improvement. To make matters worse, these posts remain uncorrected to this day. That's true. They could have corrected it. Forgot about that. They can edit their tweets. They can edit their tweets. To make matters worse, these posts remain uncorrected to this day, with the official team offering no updates, explanations, or communication to address the situation. All things considered, yeah, they could have edited, like, obviously most of the comments are pointing out the poor translation as well as the word that is the wrong translation. So I think it would have been easy to fix it because they have a check mark. So yeah, that is a problem. Korean players aren't asking for perfection. They just want a playable experience that respects their time and passion for the game. The ongoing neglect feels deliberate, especially as the Korean community lacks visibility on global platforms compared to Japanese and English communities. This is why I wanted to share this issue with you all. To be honest, we're all exhausted from trying to communicate this via official channels, as Kuro Games seems reluctant to take any meaningful action. If anyone here has suggestions on how to amplify our voices or bring meaningful attention to this issue, we'd love to hear them. Like, so for example, like a lot of, as far as I know, a lot of English speakers did have a problem with the localization, mostly with voice acting direction, which they did actually go out of their way to improve, but it didn't really, and all things considered, the voice acting from 2.0 has been like a major improvement in English is what I've been hearing. I believe like maybe even from like 1.3, the English voice acting started to improve. So they have improved other languages for their specific complaints, like English. Additionally, there was a translation issue with the translation of Jian's weapon in Japanese, which was a problem as well, and they gave compensation and fixed that. But Korean seems to be a totally different monster. So I do want to talk a little bit about this, like the problems. So first off, I want to explain most likely, again, like guys, I'm sorry, I don't know exactly their operations, but I do have a background in localization, so from my experience, I can kind of let you guys know what is kind of happening here. So first off, Wuthering Waves does not directly hire translators, okay? They most likely are hiring a localization vendor, which is another company which will provide the translation. So they make the game, they make the text, they send the text to the other company is translating the game, okay? Not only the translating, but also the dubbing, right? So that means that's being done by a different company. Now, it's highly probable that sometime during this time, they changed the company or they changed the linguist, or they requested that the company that's working with them change the linguist, all right? Because probably this is the actions they were trying to take. However, it didn't work because like from 1.0, they did this and then they tried to enact some change, but it didn't actually end up being better, right? Because instead, somebody copy and pasted a fan translation here and there, most likely. I don't know how to what extent that is, but like if they are saying it happened, like there's very easy ways for them to confirm if that actually happened or not, as well as there being a North Korean dialect, right? So these would be like, this is a major faux pas here that they would copy translations from someone else, especially not necessarily contacting the person who made the translations or anything like that. And then additionally, this is a major error that they're using the wrong dialect. Obviously, these other things, incoherent sentences, blatant mistranslations, and North Korean dialect, these would be considered major errors in translation. So that's why I think like this, the OP probably has some like translation experience because they're pointing out things that would be considered objectively errors in translation. So I know a lot of people think like translation is really subjective, and this is a problem that I saw with Solon Lee too. I forgot what event it was, but he was like giving like an interview or a talk at like a conference. I think it was like a game development conference, and he was talking about the localization issues. Solon Lee had said something along the lines that, localization quality is subjective, and you can't you can't always tell if someone's gonna like how you translated the game. However, if you are in the localization industry, you would know that there are objective standards to determine if the translation is high quality or not. And like, I don't expect the game developer to know this, because obviously they are experts in game development. They're not experts in localization. And it is a common misconception amongst a lot of people to think that localization is highly subjective. And no matter how subjective it is, there are objective measures for things that would be considered major errors or objective errors in a translation. And the things that this person has listed in incoherent sentences, blatant mistranslations, and phrases in the wrong dialect, these are considered major errors that would be objective errors in translation. And so basically what that ends up being as a player, if your game is poorly translated, you're told it's going to get better, you're told it's going to be a little bit better here and there, and it just keeps getting worse, or like the mistranslations continue, or the quality doesn't seem to be improving. And we're talking about in objective ways. And so that people who are like this, who are like probably bilingual, they can easily look at other translations and see, this is different. These things are different. This person acts different. This person is just totally different in this language versus our language. It does make the player feel less valued, right? So this is a major problem, and they have a major localization issue. And once again, it's not just Korean. I would say Korean is a high priority language for them because they do have Korean voice acting. So it should be a high priority language for them. So this amount of error and these kinds of errors are completely they're completely just really bad for the game that they would consider to be their high priority language. But it's not just Korean. Other languages too are having localization issues. So I think it's an overall problem. In general, it's highly probable also if they're having these kinds of errors, that does lead me to believe that the linguists they're using are not native Korean speakers from South Korea, or they just have really low experience. Now, they probably are translating from Chinese to Korean. And this language pair, Chinese to Korean, it's actually not a very, there's like not a lot of people that do it. And compared to like, for example, English to Korean. What can they do to fix this problem? Not only for Korean, but also the other languages. First off, again, I think there's a high probability when they said they were doing something, they were trying to do something, but they themselves probably are not, they themselves, the game developers, are obviously not localization experts. They don't have to be. This is definitely a learning experience for them, most likely. But what can they do? The first thing is, usually in the localization workflow, it's a two-step process. There's a translator and there's a reviewer. This is the standard in localization, and I have every reason to believe that they are doing this too, unless they're using machine translation, which would be machine translation, edited, and then a review. So there's still two steps where a person's supposed to be looking at it. Now, if the person's actually looking at it or not, that's that's also something we don't know. But anyway, either way, there should be two people looking at it. The first thing is, yes, you need to find the linguists who are native Korean speakers from South Korea. Again, I understand that's hard for their language pair, but at least the second step person, the reviewer, who usually has a little bit more power over the end translation, they should at least be a native speaker of Korean. Now, if they are continually having problems with that, they need to change their localization vendor, period. They need to change it because they're not doing the job right and they can't find the resources to do the job right. That means they need to change their vendor, unfortunately. So I don't know if they've tried doing that already and it didn't work out for them. And again, I understand like the pool of Chinese to Korean language pair is probably quite difficult. But yeah, they need to change whoever they're working with. Now, to review the quality of their translation, they need to hire a third party. So right now we have two parties. We have Kuro Games, we have their localization provider, and then we have the third party. So the third party would be doing a third-party review of the translations. So what they would do is they would look at a chunk of the translations. They would actually mark it. They would score it like homework. Here's all the errors you did. Here's the good things you did. Here's the bad things you did. And they would also mark the different types of errors, including major errors like this, as well as not so major errors. Now, this is usually a first step whenever you have an issue with translation quality is that you get an outside party to look at the translation and determine how it is. Because once again, there's no reason why Kuro Games would know what is a good Korean translation, right? They don't know Korean. So they themselves wouldn't be able to decide that, even if they have a singular person in their company, which is another thing they should have. I'm not sure if they do or not. They need a localization expert who is Kuro Games employee, who is a Kuro Games employee, who is somewhat, or even a team of localization experts, maybe 2 or 3, maybe 4 or 5, it doesn't matter, who are localization experts in their actual company to kind of oversee the localization issues. And if they can hire someone who has like a lot of experience, who understands like how to do quality control of localization, that's another thing they can do. But anyway, yeah, usually the first step is to hire the outside company. Usually you are hiring a global company who deals with multiple languages so that they can provide the review based off of localization standards, if it's a high quality localization or not. And then they'll also mark the types of errors you have made. If they're looking for the objective data-based way on how to determine the quality of their localizations, that's the first step they have to do. The next thing that they have to do, which they might be lacking right now, is what's called localization testing. So this is just like doing a beta test, but you're beta testing only for the translations. So obviously Kuro Games does beta testing before the release of their game, but they need to do a little bit better job of doing the localization bug testing. Because, yeah, this is the thing that people, even in English, can easily see when there's problems with the game. The words overflow. It doesn't make sense. The words are wrong. Like the problem with the heron between the outline and the extended. The outline says skill increase, but then the longer version of the Nightmare Heron says heavy attack damage increase, I think. So like that's a localization bug in the game. And so they need to actually do the localization bug testing in every language. Yeah, it's specific people. It's specific people. And yes, they have to pay for this. But if they actually want to improve their translations, then they're going to have to pay for it. Actually. So yeah, if Kuro Games is listening, I doubt they're listening, but if they're listening, right, very first thing you gotta do, make sure you have someone on your team who actually understands localization of video games. Because like I get it, like game developers don't need to know anything about localization. That's not their job. Their job is to make a great game. But some localization issues are based off of the actual code of the game. So they should at least hire somebody in their company, at least one person, if not multiple people for multiple languages, especially your high priority languages, which of course are English, Japanese, and Korean, I assume. Like hire the people who will oversee the localization process, make sure that they are, experts, have good experience, good long experience in localization to the regions that you're trying to go to. And then after that, you need to add the extra review processes to actually quantify your quality of your translation. Because these things that this person has posted would be considered major errors in a localization. So, and any review, any localization review, any good localization review would have quickly caught these kinds of problems. And it would have been clearly shown, like in their report. They have the income now, right? They have the income. There's no excuse for this, right? But this is 100% a problem. It's 100% a fixable problem. And they've already taken, I believe, too long to fix it. And yeah, it's pretty blatant too. From the examples they gave that I could see, like on the websites and stuff, is pretty blatant. So that's pretty bad. This was enlightening. I'm glad to hear you talk about it. Listen, man, I've been telling Kuro Games this whole time, I'm open to be a consultant, all right? I have no competing interest, all right? Currently. I would be happy to provide a consultation, all right? Now, most likely, I don't speak Chinese, so I'm probably not the consultant they want. But if not me, please find somebody. If not me, you can still contact me. I know people. I know people who can help, all right? So my inbox is open, all right? I know the exact people who can help, all right? Nonetheless, if they don't want my help, they should definitely still hire like a localization coordinator or a localization manager in their own team that can oversee these localization issues and then also be closer to the devs so they understand exactly what the devs want as well. Anyway, that's my 2 cents. My 2,000 cents on the issue.